Hey everybody, what is up? It is Drew from the Drewsperience. I am back. I had to take a little break for a bit because I was getting ready for my brown belt in karate. I got it. Best 34th birthday gift to myself. It was the day after my birthday, but that's besides the point. Make sure to hit the like, share, subscribe button to the Drewsperience show. We're combat sports based, switching to Canadian politics because I care about my country. I want to learn more about it by connecting with the greatest minds. I love anime too, and I'm an otaku. But most importantly today, this guest I've been eyeing for a long time since I came up upon him back in 2022 when the Ukraine-Russia war started. So joining me today is Dan McTeague, former seven-term MP, one of Canada's most trusted fuel price analysts, and a leading voice on energy affordability. He's the guy media calls when markets shift, geopolitics flare up, or Canadians need straight answers on what's driving costs. Dan connects global forces to everyday impact better than anyone, and I'm fired up to have him today on the Drewsperience. Welcome, Dan McTeague. What a great late 34th birthday gift for myself to have you on.
Well, happy birthday and great to be here, Drew. And I remember when I was 34, it was only my first, second, or third year as a member of parliament, but I didn't do karate, I did judo, and I could never get the Asoto Giri very well.
That's epic, man. No, I get it. I do what's called Kyokushin, which is full contact. So it's like you're
Wow.
using. So it's like yes, you do from white belt to green belt. You're wearing headgear. You have the gloves and the
Yeah.
shin pads. But brown and black, they want to see you put it together, full contact. You could wear a mouth guard and a
Wow.
jock strap. But yeah, no, I got it, and it feels great,
Wow.
man. It's like.
Congrats.
Thank you. It's like I'm a fighter, so if I ever decide to run, I could use that to say I don't just fight for you. I've been a fighter all my life. It's great to do this, man. It's such an honor. Like, it's kind of like one of those like things because like I've seen you on TV and you were great on Northern Perspective, Juno News, the Stephen LeDrew show, even CTV. Like you always bring it home. But before we get into that, like how did you get involved with politics? Like what made you choose that as a career over like say like law, medicine, etc.?
Probably because everyone else did so well in the fields that I might have chosen. I thought, well, the only one no one seems to be interested in is governance, Canadian politics, and I really took it very seriously from the time I was 14 or 15. I really became active in the Federal Liberal Party in the 78 by-election in a riding called York Scarborough, which I eventually became president of some 15, 16 years later. But I'd actually helped a friend of mine drop some literature in 1974 in Peterborough, where our
Hmm.
cottage is, and that was really my first experience. But I really couldn't put it all together. I was only 11 or 12, so it didn't really matter to me. But by the time I was 15, I began to see a very different view of the country, and being Irish, Scottish ancestry, Canadian on my father's side from Peterborough, Ontario, and from the French Canadian side on my mom's side from Victoriaville, Quebec. It made absolute sense. The Liberal Party was the party of the future at the time, and very much in favor of creating a national identity beyond Britain, beyond the United States, and of course championed that in many of its policies. Of course, 78, 79, 80, and 81 were very tough years. Liberals finally came to power in 19 back into power in 1980 after the short-term Clark government in 79. And I wound up on Parliament Hill by 1981, year where interest rates went to 22, 23%. A lot of people lost their homes. My father was in the housing business. He lost his business as
Wow.
well. Those were very, very difficult times, and they came as a result of many, many years of government overspending and not minding its fiscal responsibilities. Nevertheless, I did that, spent some time at U of T, did a BA there, and as well. Worked for the provincial minister of housing, the federal minister of housing. Finally, joined another friend of mine who wanted to run, and he became a very successful MP. I left that to work a stint for about 5 years, public relations, media relations director for Toyota Canada, and then was then sent to Parliament Hill in 1993 after I became candidate in what was considered a marginal riding at the time, just outside of Toronto. Won it and spent 18 years on the Hill until 2011 when it all came, thankfully for me, crashing down and I could finally focus on my family. In the meantime, my wife, Dr. Daniela Rossi, and my five kids needed some attention. So it was time I hung up the boxing gloves and got into a different arena, the arena of being a family man and being a father. But at the same time, created tomorrowsgasprice.com, predicting gas prices, something I'd worked on for many, many years in terms of trying to provide consumers a bit of a heads up in terms of where gas prices are going. By the way, it drops another penny tomorrow in Montreal,
Hmm.
another penny in Toronto tomorrow. So for Sunday, hold off until tomorrow if you want to save yourself a couple of cents, half a cup of coffee at my expense. Um, but that led me to a number of other work opportunities with gas buddy in the United States, which I left in 2017, 2018 because I realized that on the issue of energy, bingo calling gas prices was one thing, but a government that was planning to really raise the cost of living through rise in an unprecipitated and certainly unprovoked rise in the cost of energy in a nation that was blessed with an abundance of energy seemed to be a little off. So cobbled together with John Williamson, who is currently a Conservative MP, but back then president of Canadians for Affordable Energy in its embryonic state, and we took over from that and said, let's make this an idea that we aren't just about trying to save people some money when it comes, and in a real way for the past 30 years with saving gasoline prices. Let's talk about the policies the federal and provincial governments are advocating, which are driving up the cost of energy, and at the same time dealing with associated other issues. Now, I have a variety of backgrounds and experiences: automotive, housing. I've built subdivisions in my time, thankfully, and of course, a lot of work in foreign affairs. I was the point man for Canadians abroad, brought into a Privy Councillor's cabinet, and back in 2003 in the Paul Martin government. So the experience is various. Now, so a lot of people say, well, McTeague, we don't hear from a lot of other liberals of your generation. What's going on here? How come you're one of the few? And the answer is very simple. I was one of the youngest. When I was elected in 1993, I was 31 years of age.
Wow.
The average age was about 55.
Yeah.
So a lot of those guys have passed on, and they're not around. And if they are around, they're certainly not in a position where they can, keep at it with the many issues that are coming out. So that is it in a nutshell. I mean, there's a lot of other stories here, but mostly learning through the School of Hard Knocks.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you said the 70s and the 80s, like specifically like 70, like around that 76 to set to 80. What was it? No, you said at the time the Trudeau senior liberals were like the on vogue party and Trudeau mania. They had some good minds in there, like a young Jean Chrétien who become prime minister, John Turner who served as prime minister very briefly. What made that different from joining the then progressive conservatives under Robert Stanfield? What do you feel that the liberals had that the PCs then, the Tories then did not?
Well, in fairness to the conservatives, then they were about Britain, the Union Jack, the monarchy. They were about the old stodgy ways. They were very much not in some respects, and that's not to take away from them, but they were not the party of the new working class Canadian,
Hmm.
and so that did concern me to the extent that I thought that they were probably more of an afterthought than I think the leanings of the federal Liberal Party at the time, which sought consensus, which fought the separatists in Quebec. You didn't play with the separatists in Quebec at the time in the 1970s. Trudeau Senior in particular. But later led by Jean Chrétien in 1995, and we all came to Montreal. But guys like myself were pressed into action because we were bilingual
Hmm.
to uh, to remind our friends in Quebec that this is your country just as much as it is ours, and walking away from a really good nation isn't a very bright thing to do, considering what the options are going it alone, and very few people are very successful in that regard. But the issue that I think captivated me was not so much the economics, but in fact the policy, the political policy, the direction of the Liberal Party, not as a
Hmm.
socialist construct, because the Liberal Party is not socialist. It is now. I really mean that. It was actually about creating social opportunities and creating the conditions by which people could flourish, and recognizing the importance of standing up, making our own, and making of this great wilderness and our resource space a greater nation than the previous generations. And we've been doing that consistently since and before Confederation. But nevertheless, by accident and certainly by choice, I chose the Liberal Party, and many of my faith and family did as well. And it was the party of at that time Catholics, French Canadians, of Irish non-English. That's not to
Jews
take
as
away
well.
from the
A
English. I
lot of
love the
Jews
English, but
supporters. Yeah.
that's the big difference. That
Yeah. A
was
lot
the
of
difference at the time. Very different today.
Very true. Yeah, also a lot of Jewish supporters too, because I'm Jewish, and I've heard stories like how Trudeau Senior was he had ministers that were so good to the community, and that like that's why he always won, and that's true. And then Brian Mulroney came in, cleaned, got that image of the Queen out and all. He wanted to bring in like Quebec to the fold. Which look, a lot of people disagree with Mulroney, but like for me, like you're outlining who your influences were. For me, my biggest political influences, aside from today's Pierre Poilievre, Senator Leo Housakos, kind of you because of like how like because you're kind of like me where it's like you be today, as you said before recording, I'm considered a conservative now, but back then I was a liberal. So that's how I was.
Yeah.
And I'd say Mulroney was my biggest influence because of how he had relationships. I still maintain, now you could disagree with me here. If Meech Lake had passed, I believe we would not have had 1995. I'm going to give you like a what if scenario. We can play this is the one time I like to play it. Meech Lake passes. Mulroney steps down in 1991 because he did plan to do that in memoirs, and Jean Charest comes in, not Kim Campbell. Now, Chrétien still wins in 1993, but not a majority. There is somewhat of a referendum, but it's like not as big as we think because of Meech Lake succeeding. And then Jean Charest comes in 1997. Chrétien does good, but people were like, okay, let's go back because Charest understands Quebec. He knows the West. And then Paul Martin comes in, and then maybe we have Harper in '08. But that's my big what if in history. I like to play
Yeah.
that game with a lot of people.
No, it's a good one. Charlottetown Accord, Meech Lake, those were big, tough times, 91, 92.
Hmm.
And it reminded me of what happened 10 years earlier when the federal government had gone into the Constitution, and which of
Hmm.
course was ratified in 1982 without Quebec, but certainly through usage and practice, it still applied. And what would have happened in 1995 is difficult to say, but there was no doubt in my mind at the time that when Jean Chrétien got up and wept in caucus, I was there. We had felt that we'd lost the country, and I thought there was a way of stopping that. Many others had done the same thing too. I remember having a discussion with Brian Tobin and Sergio Marchi saying, "Look, my intel from going door to door in some of the places in downtown Montreal is that they are convinced that Canada doesn't like them. They're also convinced that Canada is somehow what we call a fardeau économique, is a burden on
Hmm.
a financial burden on Quebec, when in fact, it's the other way around. Quebec did very well by the Federation, far better than
Hmm.
it would on its own, as I mentioned earlier. So a lot of what ifs could have taken place, but what's happened, I think, since 2011 has been a tectonic shift in my
Hmm.
party. It's gone to the far left,
Hmm.
uh, and that's because it got outflanked by the NDP and Jack Layton. Justin Trudeau walks in and does everything that's woke, new, DEI. Call it the strangest, most bizarre of things. Somehow this was cool, I guess energized by and driven by, give everyone dope, make it pot legal. And of course, that's how we got elected. And I mean, many, many years people felt very comfortable with the idea that the Liberal Party had to go to the far left. It did. Problem is, it stayed there.
That's the thing. You can't pivot. Like, for example, when I got into politics, because I used to be a big nerd back in the day, like at 10 or 12, 11, because my dad was very into politics, like with American, like he was a conservative. I grew up in a conservative household. So we voted conservative, except after he passed, I voted NDP that one year because I did like Mulcair, for the record.
Yeah.
And then I voted for Andrew Scheer in 2019 because my candidate, the candidate for my riding in Mount Royal, David Torgman, just became the new mayor of Côte St. Luc. So I helped make that happen. So, hey, I stay involved. And then 2021, I voted PPC as a protest vote to the Conservatives because I did not like Aaron O'Toole at all. I'm sure he's a nice guy. I just did not agree with anything of his platform, always flip flopping. 2023 was when I got back in. And for Pierre, and then obviously with Bill S 203 for special needs with Senator Leo Housakos, and then 2025 got involved, and that's where I've been at too. And you're absolutely right, like where it's just insane to see what the Liberal Party has done. I would have voted Liberal back in the day, but I can't. It's just not in my good conscience. I cannot, no matter what. I'm a 5-year member of the Conservative Party now.
Yeah. Well, look, it's not always easy to subscribe to a particular partisan bent.
No.
What I find tragic is that people who call themselves liberals today have no idea of the origins of the Liberal Party and what it stood for, and the ideologies that underpinned it. It wasn't a party of convenience and flavor of the day, although many times it's done that. In its time, it's become very adaptable and being what some people refer to as pragmatic, able to change with changing times. But what has, I think, been very clear is that the adoption, the rigidity of the adoption of net zero, of other
Hmm.
these social policies have been highly contentious, deliberately divisive, and I think top-down authoritarian, and that's just not something I think that most Canadians accept. Now we mix in the fact that there's economic hardship. It's painful, it's real, and it is not the result of Donald Trump. It is the result of bad policies, reckless policies, of which I studied and worked with and was very much a part of for the past 30 years. So it's going to be very hard for people to push me over on some of these issues because I've been there a lot longer than
Hmm.
those out there who think it is and who believe that Liberal Party, the cult that it has become, is somehow the same thing it was 30, 40 years ago. It is diametrically opposed, very different from, and it is a very dangerous construct. And I think we're starting to see that now in terms of not just the policies on the social side, but on the economic side, which are leading us over the economic abyss, the likes of which I wouldn't be surprised to see Quebec and others pack up and say, "We're out of here. This place
Hmm.
is this is last chance saloon, and it's not worth staying."
I have to ask you because you said you've worked under both Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin, the Honorable Jean Chrétien and Honorable Paul Martin. What do you think made each unique in their management style of leading the country during their time as prime minister?
Canadian was a guy who could really rally the troops. He was a flag, Canadian flag person. He spoke very much to and very passionately to what Canada was. And he gave us a good sense of be proud of your country and be
Hmm.
proud of who we are, and great times lie ahead. He was also very experienced. I kind of found it was funny in the last election. They were saying Pierre Poilievre has no world experience, and neither did Jean Chrétien. Okay, these guys worked in and understood the craft of government in the context of the world that was in front of them, and so Chrétien was very good in that regards. Paul Martin was really the attached to the hip with Jean Chrétien. Without Martin, Chrétien could not have been successful. Without Chrétien, Martin would not have had the profile that he did. Martin was more accommodating, less divisive, didn't try to play one, part of the caucus against the other. He was a nice guy. It's probably why he didn't do as well in the end, because he was trying to be a consensus builder. And sometimes you have to make some tough decisions. He couldn't. And that may have been the big fault. Of course, Canadians, had an opportunity to vote for a young Stephen Harper who, said the right things, had the right moves, and the Liberals had been in power 13, 14 years. People were tired. They didn't dislike us, but in 2006, I think they thought, well, maybe there's a better alternative out there, and the jury is still out. What I really want people to understand is that the difference between liberals and conservatives weren't as severe as they are today.
Hmm. Very true.
In fact, I could sit down and have a beer with any one of the conservative members of the caucus and New Democrat members. I had good friends there. And, apart from the glare of what you saw in the theatrics in Parliament in a question period, many bills got passed. I passed several private members' bills. I think I still have the record for the most private members' bills passed in Confederation. And that's not a boast. It's just a reality that at the time, I could take issues like making RESP's tax deductible and get the NDP and some conservatives on side. I could bring in changes to criminal code, making high-speed pursuits illegal, and get conservatives, liberals, and New Democrats and Bloc on side. So,
Mhm.
when you take away the whips, when you take away the partisanship, you can actually accomplish a hell of a lot more. That is what's lost in this parliament. And one can say, it's Harper's fault, it's Trudeau's fault. However, it's happened. These people don't speak to each other anymore. They
No,
could, they should, they won't, and that's a disservice to the country.
that's so true. Now, I like what you said there about Paul Martin, where you said Chrétien was a rallier. He's like a hype man, like I did with my intro there. I mean, I think I should be a hype man for the Conservative Party. So hey, CPC, hire me. Like I'll tell you my price. Plug myself in there. No, like, but it's funny you mentioned about Paul Martin because I'm a member of the Quebec Liberal Party too provincially because we don't really have a Conservative Party in Quebec. Like we kind of do, but they're still very small and a little like I just don't agree with their views. So to say. So I'm part of the Quebec Liberals, so because it's a Big Ten party there. And one of the people was under Martin. She said the exact same thing, but she brought something up about Martin. Very nice guy, but Martin had the vision of a long-term game. He was a systems guy. Like he was trying to build that Child Canada Benefit Act to
Yeah.
efficiency. He was trying to build like trying to improve healthcare, trying to work with the West, even like the reformer, like the then just merged conservatives to say, look, we can work together here. That's what Paul Martin was. But then the sponsorship scandal came out, and then the rivalry with Chrétien, obviously. Like, what was that like, the rivalry with the Chrétien faction? I always wanted to ask that because apparently it's
I
considered
was a
one of
big
the
fan of
greatest.
Chrétien. Yeah, and Drew, I was a big fan of Chrétien's in 1991,
Hmm.
1992, when we had the leadership, in 1990 rather, sorry.
Hmm.
Trying to go back in time. Paul Martin was there, but he represented what I thought was a continuation of John Turner's policies, and some of the people around Turner were also the people who were around Martin. And so he was a new kid in the block. He represented extraordinary wealth. And I liked his vision, but I just thought, his creds were basically, I'm old enough to remember his father, Paul Martin Sr., who
Hmm.
was minister of responsible for social programs in Canada. And as a result of being that minister, brought in things like the baby bonus, which I lived on. My
Hmm.
family lived on. People didn't make a lot of money in the 60s, some did. But those baby bonuses and bringing in milk bottles and getting your 10 cents back, and those were things that allowed you to get by because you
Hmm.
could buy a loaf of bread for 19 cents back in those days. All this really means is that the difference between Chrétien and Martin became more pronounced as it became clear that Chrétien didn't necessarily like the up and coming Paul Martin, and I think the feeling was mutual. The Battle of 1990 carried itself well into the early 2000s,
Hmm.
and then Chrétien left, and we had the Gomery inquiry that didn't help the Liberals. We had a number of other factors that where the Liberal Party was actually at war with itself. So Martin people versus Chrétien people, and that didn't turn out as well as some had thought, especially those who were very loyal to Jean Chrétien. And were big writers, I think of Lawrence Martin and other things. So a lot of these people really had it out for Paul Martin, and I think it all came to a head when uh, Jean Chrétien's chief of RCMP, Zaccardelli, was made a declaration during the federal election in 2006, 5 and 6, that liberals were somehow responsible for inside trading or information, and that he had evidence to that effect. Turned out it would be total garbage.
Hmm.
But I remember an NDP member, running it with Judy Washalisa Lease was her name, and from Winnipeg, and she had this big scoop. But that was Julia Zaccardelli on orders from somebody to try to scupper Paul Martin. It worked.
Wow.
Unfortunately for Mr. Zaccardelli, he too was shown the door on a file that I was dealing with Mayor Arar, and found to have given testimony before a committee that turned out to be inaccurate. Nevertheless, the rivalry between Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien is the reason why the Liberals ultimately failed and why Paul Martin had to leave
Hmm.
in 2006. It's not so much that Stephen Harper won the election, but the Liberals, were engaged in what would look like a less than conspicuous civil war, and
Hmm.
that is probably why we wound up with the Harper government. Otherwise, the Liberals might have been there another 5, 7 years. I know I was at the center of it, so I know what happened during that period of time. Someday there'll be a book written on it. In the meantime, I'm not at the publishing stage
I'll
yet.
buy it. I'll buy it. I'll make
Thanks,
sure. Just
Drew.
tell me when, and just give me a signed copy. I wanted to ask too because you know the rivalry, but you won three majorities with under that banner of the Liberals. But I want to ask this: when Stockwell Day came in 2000, was he considered the biggest threat to Jean Chrétien back then? Because there, I think there was. I was reading that at the time Stockwell was likable. He was bilingual, and he almost gave problems to Chrétien until the PCs of Joe Clark, they were still around, and then there was the whole Barney on CTV that Warren Kinsella did when he went at Stockwell. Like, make of it what you will, but Stockwell was considered a big threat apparently back then, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, and I don't have much about Stockwell Day. He was strong. He's much stronger than at the outset than Preston Manning was,
Hmm.
and he had to create a new party. The only thing I can say is a footnote to me and to Stockwell Day was that in 2000 he moved a motion of
Hmm.
non-confidence in the government, and it was based on a report that I had written in 1997, basically calling the federal government to uh, pass on the taxes that
Hmm.
that the federal government was collecting, um, rather than oil companies grabbing it. It actually came from this thing
Hmm.
called the Liberal Committee on Gasoline Pricing.
Wow, he's got
So
everything,
Stockwell
guys. This
Day,
guy, he came prepared today with
well, I
primary
keep these things
sources.
handy because I often have to use it to the young journalists who think that I've just invented this overnight. So that says June 1998. One of the recommendations in this report, 13 or 14 of them, was that the federal government find a means in which to give back the GST
Mhm.
to Canadians. And Stockwell Day, I said, yeah, I said you have to find a mechanism. It's a problem. You have to find a mechanism. Stockwell Day forgot about the mechanism and just said rebate it. So he said to the government, I'm going to take the Dan McTeague report that Liberals signed up and I'm going to make you guys eat it. So Chrétien turned to me and said, you have to answer this in the House of Commons, which I did and defended the government, but also defended what I'd said, which is what Stock had sort of changed it around a little bit. He may not remember this, but it's on the public record. Um, and then I get a call a day or two later after the debate, said, be around on the weekend because you're going to be interested in what happens. Chrétien said, I'm going to take Stockwell Day and his recommendation that he has no confidence, and I'm going to call an election. Chrétien
Wow.
cleaned his clock. So that's where the 2000 election happened, ironically, because of a couple of factors that took some of the recommendations that I had worked on back way back when. I don't want to get into too much detail about it, but please, president at affordableenergy.ca. Anybody wants to ask the question, throw yourself at that, and I'll be glad to answer it. But it is one of the recommendations I think that was really critical in getting that election and giving Chrétien his final majority.
Amazing. Well, I gotta say this. So now to move it to energy policy. So, after COVID, we're seeing like after COVID is like slowly ending, the Ukraine war happens, and we start seeing like countries started coming to Canada. Like we got Japan, we had Germany, and the liberals said, well, there's just no case there. Dan, why? Like, I know that they're stubborn with their net zero, but let's, this would have helped with inflation. It would have helped with affordability. It would have helped counterbalance what was going on with the pandemic and supply management. Like, does it anger you to no end? Like, where you want to pull your hair out and say, like, we could be the South Korea of the North, but instead we're choosing to put the noose around our necks.
Yeah, we made a big mistake. We followed this vain pursuit of a group of people called the World Economic Forum and those who've been pushing the net zero agenda for some time. And it has its origins, to going back to 1978 with my first campaign, 79, when you had people who were Canadian, Morris Strong in particular, who I knew. He was a candidate for us and a Liberal candidate, but he quit in Scarborough Center when I was running or helping the campaign in New York Scarborough. I went out with him. I remember driving his little BMW. Never saw a car like that before. A 318. It was state of the art, all leather on the inside. And I was there with Paul Cosgrove and myself. Nevertheless, he's gone, but we have gone and swallowed whole this idea that somehow, one molecule, CO2, should be responsible for upending our entire economic and political system. And it's that simple. We are so convinced that an inert molecule that's necessary for life and that we contribute maybe 3 or 4% of 0.04%, which is almost at the point where we start CO2 starts to lose its effect in terms of sustaining human life, plants, and growth on this planet. We've become transfixed, and we had since 2015 on the idea that climate change, more than anything else, is the real threat to our existence. And we heard it for 20, 30 years. It's clear that some people who want to control populations have used this as an excuse to try to trot out the idea that somehow Canada was the bad actor here and that we should shut down our natural gas and our oil development and, of course, other resources and put a cap on what we emit, only in terms of CO2. We don't really care about the other environmental damages, although we've done great work on that front. So to me, it's very much a club that has, infested Canada, got poltroons like called poltroon guys like Justin Trudeau to go along with it. But this is dangerous stuff because what it means is that we've seen a massive decline and a shift downwards in terms of the expectations of strength of our economy. Now, some economies in some disciplines are doing okay, but these are the boom, bust, and echoes left from a previous generation when we got our financial house in order and we had our oars in the water rowing in the same direction. When I wrote that report in 1998, Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin came to me and said, "You're not attacking the upstream." I said, "What do you mean? You're not attacking the oil industry?" I said, "No, this is about refineries trying to discipline little independent gas retailers and snuffing them out. But why the concern?" And Paul Martin was very blunt. If I don't get more pipelines built in this country, I will not meet my debt commitments. And the IMF will be on our tail, basically
Mm.
relegating us to third world debtor, honorary debtor status. So we understood back then the importance of oil and gas. And for Quebec, for Nova Scotia, for New Brunswick, you're sitting on a pile of it. Why aren't you getting it out of the ground rather than importing it from Saudi Arabia or from Basra, Iraq, or from Nigeria, or even take it from our American friends in the U.S., where a lot of your oil comes up the street. The Valero plant up at Saint-Romuald is a lot of that's U.S. shale oil. Why are we not using
Yep.
Canadian products? And if Quebec and other provinces want to stand in the way of that, then they ought to also consider the fact that if they're going to be part of the problem, then they ought to pay for being part of the problem. In British Columbia in particular, I mean, I'm going off on a tangent here,
You
but
could, yeah,
the
go ahead.
TMX expansion cost you 50 billion bucks because they want to do a variation of their El Bozos routine of we'll use every tool in the toolbox to fight this. And by the way, punch in Dan McTeague and Trans Mountain expansion. You'll see a lot of work I did on that. And I said, I'm going to fight you guys because at the end of the day, you're hurting Canada, you're hurting the future, and you're going to drive out investments in this country. Why is that important, Drew? We can't get anybody to invest in any projects in Canada. No one wants
Because
to accept
of all the
federal
red
government
tape,
money.
all the red tape.
Exactly. Well,
Like
not just red tape. You've basically said, get the hell out of here. Even if the federal government approves a pipeline, they allow every Tom, Dick, and Harry nut job lawfare group to come in and try to attack these things. And so if I'm a company like Kinder Morgan, I'm prepared to put 6 billion bucks in your economy, and you turn around and after getting permits, decide that you're going to allow these people to go loose, despite the fact that you have legal authority to do what you're doing. Sooner or later, you're going to wind up paying for it. No wonder Nutrien. You ever hear of the company Nutrien, the largest potash
mhm.
producer in the world, from Saskatchewan, and it's the largest corporation in that field. Didn't choose Canada to export its potash, which the world desperately wants, including China, Korea, Japan. It chose the United States. Why? Because this is not a stable place to invest any type of money. There's too many risks, too many delays. We can't get our act together. We can't fight our way out of a wet paper bag.
No, we can't. The other thing too with Quebec that I'm very vocal on, I mean, this is gonna, it probably is gonna lose. It gets people angry, but the truth hurts. Quebec, the Green Communist lobby has to step aside, let Quebec get its LNG potential, use its hydro to trade with and other areas. Stop the nationalist rhetoric. Or you know what? Like, if you were PM, would you threaten to cut equalization payments, like in that case, or is that too militant? You'd say, because that's my solution.
No, I would simply say to Quebec, you to go Quebec, you have to charge what the rest of the world is charging. If you're charging Americans 17 cents a kilowatt hour, you should be charging your own customers 17 cents a kilowatt hour, or do in Ontario. Anywhere from 17 to 32 cents. But you're going to, if you want to protect consumers, put it on the debt. Ontario is accumulating 10 billion bucks in debt every year. But Quebec has a huge advantage in terms of hydroelectric. But nobody could ever possibly flood tens of thousands of acres and create all sorts of methane emissions that are continue to go out of the James Bay projects and other projects, La Grande Baleine and others that they've done for decades. They can't get away with that. That's environmental damage to try to pretend you have, cool, creds when it comes to the environment. And I'm sorry, les éoliens, the windmills, useless,
They are.
useless as anything. They take a lot of energy. They take a lot of concrete to build. They only work for 20 or 30 years. You need oil to make those gears move. I don't want to get into the specifics of all
No.
these things, but I think it's fanciful for any province or any leaders to say, "Oh, we're green and we defend that. It's in our DNA," as I heard Yves Blanchette suggest. It's not in your DNA. What's in your DNA is 13 billion bucks in equalization that keeps your province happy while ticking off the rest of the country. It says, "Hey, we can't get our oil across your territory because you're playing this virtuous game of I'll take your money, but I won't let you pay for it. I won't let you have the means to pay for it." This is why this is not working. The Federation needs someone who's prepared to say, there's a corridor, east and west, north and south. Anybody who stands in the way will get arrested and will go to jail. And by the way, we won't stack the Supreme Court of Canada as the Liberals have done with a bunch of alarmists and fanatics who frankly, and activists who've given license to this kind of shenanigan that is destroying Canada.
Mhm.
My generation is going to be the last strong generation. After this, it gets worse. Your generation, Drew, in big trouble because we've basically mortgaged the future and we continue to add debt while saying, oh, we can get the rest of the world to buy our hydrogen. No one wants your bloody hydrogen. They want your oil, they want your gas, they want your minerals, they want your ag products, they want your mine, and they want your the products that you've done very well at making, including automotive. All those now are at risk and very much in the air, up in the air.
You're very true. And I want to ask you this about automotive and industry because you've seen that file, the Carney, we'll get to Carney in a minute, but I want to ask you this because this is my theory. I say open the mines, build the pipelines, use the profits to get to the 5% of GDP with the US. But like I hate hearing this. We got to diversify with like the other world. Don't buy the F-35s, buy the Gripens. Okay, the Gripens are not bad, okay? They survive in the cold. I want the F-35s. If I'm a country, Dan, it's like hockey. Do you go get the middle tier defensive players that can score 20 goals, but they can't take that next level? No, you want the finishers. I want the F-35s. And they say, well, the K-57 tanks from South Korea, they're less expensive. The logistics don't make sense. Like, I mean, what's your thoughts on all these people who are the liberals who are now apparently military experts? And it's like I'm having a field day with this.
Last March I said two plants were going to close. Northvolt closed the EV
Mhm.
plant in Quebec, and I said the Bright Drop plant in Ingersoll, Ontario, making EV deliveries. And I said part of that plan will be Carney's going to go to Europe looking to do a deal to kill the F-35. I got
Mhm.
on record here. I've posted the video before. March 14th of last year, I said I thought they were going to go for the Dassault Rafale in France, but in
France.
fact it was a Gripen that they went for. The liberals do this. If they think, 5, 10% tariffs are a big deal, how about 100%? You turn your back on something that we started as liberals in 1995, where we began the process of building F-35s. A number of countries signed on at the time to create a sort of a united front behind this particular new technology. And we had a lot to do with it. If we think we can walk away from that and the billions of dollars that is currently being supported by the F-35 and then walk away and try to be cute and trendy with the Swedes, good luck with that. Look, no offense to the Swedes, but they make great furniture at IKEA. When it comes to this particular jet, it's out of date and doesn't serve our needs. It might be great for liberal virtue signaling and for the elbozos out there who thought we should stick it into the Americans. Listen, we have created the conditions and the problems of this country. This
Mhm.
was not Donald Trump as of January of 2025. These problems are protracted, they're deep-seated, and for the past 10 years, we've voted for socks, sobbing, and selfies with Trudeau. Now we're voting for a guy who basically turned around and BS'd his way. I'm saying it right now. I said this on Northern Perspective last year. Mark Carney said he had something to do with the 1997 balancing the budget. He wasn't even in Canada. It was
He
a
was in
Goldman Sachs
Harvard.
hack. In 2008, he said he prevented the recession. Baloney. It was my former provincial colleague and federal finance minister, Jim Flaherty, and the previous liberals who ensured that at the time we didn't have the same kind of deregulation in our banking sector. Paul Martin fought very hard to prevent that, especially led by people like the Bank of Montreal's Matthew Barrett. I know, I remember this stuff. I got the receipts.
Mhm.
So what has happened to this country is that we have sort of said, "Oh, it's all the Americans' fault. Let's blame them, and let's see if we can put a stick in their spokes." Good luck with that. You're going to get bulldozed. And you know what? It's because of hype. It's because of hubris, and it's misplaced, and it's because it's our own damn fault. And I can
Mhm.
say that with absolute confidence, and I can back it up. Anybody who wants to pretend, as liberals do, that this is our misfortune is the result of what the Americans are doing. The Americans have simply taken advantage of our decision on the green front to weaken the Canadian economy and to prevent billions of dollars in economic growth. Imagine if we had 17 LNG projects. Imagine we'd have $1 trillion deal with the United States already, and they wouldn't have built 7 LNG projects to help save Europe after the war in Russia, with Russia's war against Ukraine. Canada decided to stifle itself, to use an Archie Bunkerism.
Hmm. Exactly. It's like Canadian Bacon. You ever watch the movie Canadian Bacon where the Americans want to invade that the Americans hate Canada? It feels like now it's the reverse. It's like a psyop where it's like we're getting Canadians to hate Americans. Like you're on X and you see all these like liberal like accounts that are like saying like, oh, Mark Carney's the savior. And to parlay it into Mark Carney, you called it out. And Carney is I call him Carnage Carney or Con Man Carney. I mean,
Yes.
That's how I look at it. Like, I mean, he does not represent me. The guy maybe wear a suit, but he's anything but. When I look at those eyes, I could see a lot of lies and evil, and I just don't agree with him. And but what when you were going on the campaign trail with Mario, with the candidate in Burlington. What did you feel like if all the stuff that was stacked against us didn't happen, Dan? How would you have seen like a conservative victory, minority or majority? What's your thoughts on it?
It should have been a majority, but I got what kept coming back in my mind, and
Mhm,
I love playing. I love playing rock music. One of my favorite bands, as it is for everybody else, Tragically Hip.
mhm,
They have a song, 100th Meridian, and
mhm,
everybody knows that song. It's really cool and whatnot. They have a sentence in there, and it describes exactly what's happened to Canada. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Gord Downie had it right. A generation so much dumber than its parents came crashing through the window. Um, I was shocked when I was going to door to door. I said, listen, I was an 18-year Liberal member of Parliament, part of that in cabinet. I'm not voting for them. How the hell can you? And they just look at you like, a stunned glance, like, oh, elbows up. Holy mac! It was a psyop operation. I mean, Sam Cooper of the Bureau and others have pointed this out.
I love Sam, by the way. Great
Yeah, he
author.
is. He's fantastic in what he does. His stuff is very accurate. They hate him. No wonder the media doesn't want to talk. By the way, you speak of media. I used to do 40, 50 interviews on gasoline
Yeah, I saw you
across
on
the
CTV.
country
That's how I
every
found out
day. They
about
don't
you.
do it now. They don't.
Yeah.
Hey, gasoline's not important. We all drive electric vehicles, don't you know? By the way, how's it going for all the subsidies, the billions of bucks you've blown that we can't pay back because these guys have basically vanished? Why? Because no one wants these damn things. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, but it's getting cold outside. I'm not driving a four slice toaster on wheels to get to work. I mean, I need something that's practical, that's real, and it's going to be around for a long time. Even the woke International Energy Agency. I remember having this discussion with Evan Solomon, and he was sort of cheering on, no, they're saying we don't need oil anymore. Good luck with that. You're going to need it for the next 50 years, probably 100 years, because it's used for everything. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter what you talk about. There's no replacement for hydrocarbons. And if you ever thought there was, good luck, because I can tell you where it would take us, Drew. Without hydrocarbons, we'd be living the state of nature, eating acorns and wearing animal
And
skins.
mud huts.
No fire because there'd be emissions on that.
Oh, it's crazy. But no, you were great. What was it like working with Mario though? Like, and what's your thoughts on him as a voice for the today's Conservative Party?
Mario has energy, tremendous energy, and he's got great sources and he's got great topics and he's able to, do it from his own the comfort of his own home. This is a guy who was new to Canada, comes from um, San Salvador, El Salvador.
Mhm.
So he came up as a poor kid working, his parents were virtually refugees. And I know something about that because I opened up the Canadian Embassy in San Salvador back in 2004, I guess. So I was always told never leave the compound, never leave the hotel because it's not safe anymore. Now, it's one of the safest countries in which to live in the world. But he comes from a kid who learned a lot of what he has, the school of hard knocks. He's no
Mhm.
nonsense. He takes everybody on. He has a lot of enemies, but my goodness, he's waking people up to the reality that they need to be aware of just how bad things have become. And for all of us, it's like, well, what is the alternative, Dan? The alternative is smart policy. But you're not going to get that from the Liberals, and you're not going to get that from the NDP. You're not going to get that from the Bloc. They're all part of
Mhm.
the same left-wing group that believes that governments can spend ad infinitum, and that we can wish away these problems by pretending that people who disagree with us are involved with somehow hate speech or rage farming or some crap like that.
Mhm.
Whatever comes in their mind, because it isn't very sophisticated. What Mario's trying to do is to equate practical issues with the politics that is being espoused, because policy does have a lot to do with the direction the country has
Mhm.
been taking. And right now, it is so very much on the downtrodden and the wrong path. It doesn't take it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put us back where we need to be. And that decision should have been made the last election. It wasn't. And that's because a lot of people bought into the Mark Carney nonsense. The guy's a shameless self-promoter, SSP. And I've proven that a couple of times that he comes out and says all these things. He has nothing to show for it. You've had him as prime minister for 8 months. What has he shown? Zip. So, and there's other guys who I thought would have been a lot, much far better as a leader. My old friend goes back to my days of childhood friend in grades when we were 6 years old. Frank Bayless would have made a better leader
Mhm.
than Mark Carney. Knew his stuff, and not just in business, but as an engineer. Had a background, took a small company that his mother, nurtured back in the 1960s in Montreal. knew Gloria Bayless very well before she passed on and made it a multi-million dollar entity, he would have been a lot better and more effective, not because he's my friend, because he knew what he was talking about. And when you saw
Exactly.
him, it impressed people. If this was done based on, not credentials or pretend credentials, and what I've done, what I haven't done, Frank Bayless would be the leader of the Liberal Party, and that's probably something I could support.
Me too. Yeah, Frank was a very pragmatic guy. I vote. This is a big lesson. Don't vote for hairstyle or personality. Vote for competence. Like I'm gonna quote Lewis Black. If you say that, ooh, I'm gonna vote for him because that guy seems like a great guy to drink a beer with. If you're at a bar with him, you make sure he keeps on effing drinking. When
I like it.
that's a great one. No, but honestly, Dan, another thing too I want to ask is because I'm sure you've had communications with Pierre Poilievre, and he gets a bad rap of being too Trumpian. He's a reformist, really. Like the reformist wing controls the CPC, because that's how Quebec does look at the Conservative Party. My goal is to try to help win the Montreal area as a influencer. What's your rebuttal to people who say the reformists want to bring back abortion, they want to ban this, they want to ban that, like, and what's your message to those who feel Pierre is really like that without really knowing who he is? What's your message to them?
Well, you've been drinking the Kool-Aid. Uh, you know, make your own decisions, but make sure they're not influenced by people who have, another kind of agenda or are paid by the federal government to have that agenda.
Hmm.
Let's not be Pollyannish about this. The mainstream media is paid 30,000 bucks per every head by your federal taxes. So there's no doubt in my mind that there's no discounting the relationship the media has. And Pierre Poilievre represents a real threat to them because he needs to get the finances of the country right. The same way Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien did
Hmm.
in the 1990s. We're at a critical point where the decision is, are you going to or are you not going to? And I would say to those who think that they have time to sort of sit back and pretend all sorts of wonderful things and entertain all sorts of woke ideas that have no practicality. How the hell are you going to afford your mortgage? How are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to pay your
Groceries.
utilities? And by the way, where's your food coming from? Have you seen food inflation go through the roof? And don't blame Donald Trump for this, and don't blame Pierre Poilievre for this. Blame the fact that for the past 4 terms, you've elected people who are more interested in promoting 2015 pot, 2019 climate bedwetting, 2021 COVID, 2025 orange haired man black.
Orange
I
man.
mean, what level of and people can say, yeah, well, I don't really care. Let's just move on with this. That's fine. You can't afford the luxury of second guessing and looking a gift horse in the mouth. I don't know Pierre Poilievre as well as many people do. I don't think I've spoken to him in quite some time, but I can tell you the policies of Pierre Poilievre look a lot like the liberal policies that I endorsed in the 1990s
Hmm.
as a liberal MP. And by the way, to those who say no, you weren't there. I was. And to those who were there, they know full well that what I'm saying is the absolute truth.
Damn right, man. So we're going to end it off there. That's a great way to give a great lesson to those for the next election. And make sure, like, if you want change, vote conservative. Don't shoot yourself because insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Dan, you're doing great with affordable energy. I would love to have you on again and again because I feel like we have that chemistry now. Where can people find you if they want to learn about affordable energy? Because you got the poster there. Please plug in everything you have. I want to make
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
you're
Well, you can see it at
supported.
affordableenergy.ca. I put
Mhm.
the poster up there all the time beside one of my favorite, which is the official painting of the Lancaster and the two Spitfires
Mhm.
that are escorting it. Actually, it's a Hurricane and a Spitfire, but that was given to me by Gus Cloutier, former Sergeant at Arms of the House of Commons. I had a fascination for those planes. A lot of them were built here in Canada, by the way. But the best way to reach me, affordableenergy.ca. I have a lot of fun on Twitter. So gas wizard is probably gas price wizard is probably the best way to get a hold of me there.
Mhm.
The engagement isn't always as you only have so many characters in which make your points known. But by all means, email me. French or English, parlez deux langues, donc il n'y a pas de problème avec ma compréhension. But if you get a chance, affordableenergy.ca, present at affordableenergy.ca, and that's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Amazing.
That's fun.
Amazing. Well, I really, really want to thank you for doing this. Like now that we know each other, it feels like I have a friend for life, as they say in politics. When you have the same ideas and you want trying to change, that's how you have a friend for life. And I mean that. It's such an honor to have you. I really want to have you on again and again, like Stephen LeDrew does in Northern Perspective. So let's do this again in the future when there's something big comes up, because you break it down clearly. Guys, if you like Dan, make sure to follow him. It's such an honor to have like him on a Saturday. Like my Saturday is made now. And follow him and follow the Drewsperience on X. We're on all platforms too. Hit the like, share, subscribe button. I'm at 540 subscribers. It's free. I'm trying to get to 1,000 by end of the year or by halfway next year. I do the slow route. I'm like the Japanese. I like to do it slowly and methodically. But Dan, it was great to have you on, man. And I really hope we can do this again and keep doing it. It was an honor to have you on. You've been fighting for affordability, and that's something I can always get behind. And you'll always have me cheerleading you in the background.
Great to be here in the Drew experience, and I look forward to that black belt you so clearly deserve. And I could use some help, by the way. I may need a few people, keep a few people away from me for defensive purposes.
Perfect. Let's talk. All right.